Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're welcoming back Wes Woodbury, a game designer, illustrator, graphic designer, and owner of FunDaMental Games. Today, we're talking about his newest game, Forge, which is currently on Kickstarter. Wes, welcome to the binge. How you doing?
Doing fantastic. Glad to be on your show again, James. I heard it was your 330th episode. That's fantastic.
231. This is the 231. And last time you were on the podcast was episode 81. So it's been some time.
Yeah, it has been.
Oh, it's great to have you back, man. So you've been pretty busy cranking out games. I think last time we talked, Questros was the last game you had that we had you on the podcast with. But I know that you continuously are cranking out titles and things like that. I would encourage people to go back to episode 81 if you want to go super deep on FunDaMental Games and the history of Wes Woodbury. But today we're going to get into some of the things he's been doing since, and maybe get some learnings and so forth about game design and game development, and then we'll talk about Forge. How's that sound?
Right on.
So I know one thing that you've been working on since we talked last was you've got into 3D animation, right? You even helped me on one of my last campaigns. You did some elements for that. How's that going?
Yeah, I learned about it when I was just trying to find a way to explore the hobby more because it's such an expensive hobby, and see is there something more I can learn or do that would allow me to contribute more to a campaign. So I figured out what people use. It's a program. Most people use a program called Blender, and it's absolutely free. I couldn't believe it. I downloaded a program on my computer and just started watching tutorials on YouTube and learning from some people in the trade. And before you know it, I was spinning things and making things, and it's a very cool program.
Now I got to ask the video, I was looking at the animation on your Kickstarter video. Did you do that animation yourself?
Yeah, the campaign video for Forge and all the GIFs in there, that was all made by myself using Blender and After Effects to kind of tweak some of it later on.
Wow. So you've built some skills up.
Try it. I mean, I got to give a shout out to Ori Kagan. He does Kagan Productions, and he built a product that allows you to quickly adapt your images to traditional game products like tokens or boxes.
Yep.
But then animating it from there is a lot of other hard work. But his package at least gets you your foot in the door.
Yeah, that was kind of cool when he launched that. I guess, he's so busy, right? And Ori does, shout out to him. He does amazing, amazing work. But he was getting to a point where he only has so much time. You can only take on so many clients, right? And when that happens, typically your pricing will start to creep up, right? Because if you have more demand than you do supply, then you got to kind of price accordingly. And super high elite level work that he does. And he's like, I have all these people still coming to me that are small players. I'm kind of outside of their price range, but I think I can still help, right? And he created these base packages to help, again, people looking to get into Blender, which is free, as you said, to learn how to do some of this stuff themselves. And I think if you look around the internet, there's so many tools now available to people that when you have the larger budget games and Kickstarter campaigns, I think that's where you can pump some money into some of these videos. But some of these other campaigns, small publishers, independent publishers that are trying to kind of get their foot in the door and don't have a lot of budgetary dollars to put towards something like a video, there's so many other things you can do to get there, right? If we look at, my last campaign, I did Planting Evidence. Most of that video was using stock video, right? So if you go on storyblocks.com, there's a plug. I don't owe them any money. I have a subscription there, but it allows you to download little 10-second clips, and I strung together a bunch of clips and put a voice track underneath it, which kind of tied into the story of the game. What shocks me often is sometimes people will go and create a video on a game that's all digital when they have a physical copy they could shoot. You know what I mean? Like, you have the game, just shoot what you got. You don't have to go and do all this crazy 3D animation, right? So there's lots of practical ways to to get in there and get started. And it's cool when I see people like yourself, being able to do things like your own GIFs and things like this for the campaign.
There's definitely workarounds, like you mentioned with the physical prototype. That's what I had done with Dungeon Makers, was tried to make video and components out of the physical. But
Yeah.
there's something different about digital that just attracts the eye when you're scrolling or when you're looking on a mobile device. They're just some little bit different, and I think that's why Ori and the other production companies do so well. Is it feels uh, attractive to the eye to watch these programs and play.
Oh yeah, I mean they look like video game trailers too, right? David Diaz is another one, great one from Mesa Labs. He's uber talented. So um,
Orange for money.
yeah. So what were some of the learnings you carried over from these other campaigns into this campaign?
I learned to never get your hopes too high up, to keep yourself grounded, set your levels low, and make sure that no matter how confident you are, you just always have to keep engaging your audience, your backers, and out on the social web, whoever you're talking to. You can't always focus on your own product. It's still just as important to help contribute to others,
Yeah.
whether it's commenting on their posts or likes or even just general games. It's making sure that you're not kind of selfishly just focused on yourself.
It's amazing. Somebody once told me that the greatest enemy of success sometimes can be success, right? Because you forget. It's easy to forget the grind, right? It's easy to forget everything you went through to get to where you were, and you got to do that every campaign. Like it's, new campaign. All right, now I got to cultivate that audience again, right? I got to start doing all these kind of fundamental things that are involved in building out a Kickstarter campaign. That you can't assume is just the people are going to come. You got to build that audience. And in a case like yours, you've got a new genre, right? So you've got a Euro now that you're launching. What was the decision for you to kind of get into Euros? Where did that kind of spring from?
Well, in all my other games and in my whole life, I've always enjoyed the fantasy, the dungeons, the dragons, the wizards, the magic. And but I know that doesn't appeal to all people. And when you're trying to build board games and try to spread your audience, sometimes you just need to realize that there's a different audience out there that you can tap into. And so I wanted to still have that fantasy touch, which is why I went with forging and blacksmithing. So there's still swords and fire and whatnot, but it's something that's more widespread in culture, like smithing and ironwork and all of that. We wouldn't have the society we have today without that core element from medieval times. So I just wanted to touch on something outside of fantasy, and I also wanted to do a game that wasn't just about rolling dice and moving warriors and stuff around. So that's where the Euro mechanic came in. I played a lot of fantastic Euro games like Peace for Odin or Viticulture or Stone Age, and I wanted to see, can I do something like that? Is there a different spin I can put on it, but it's still familiar? And that's what we ended up with, is Forge.
So did the theme come first, or was it the theme then before mechanics?
The thought process of non-fantasy game was the first thing that was going through my head, and the second thing was Euro, and settled on the idea of Forge because I was kind of in a Forge and Fire binge mode. I was watching those episodes, probably 2 or 3 a week, and I just love how in 3 hour time span they have to make a perfect knife and present it, and that showed. I was trying to marry the two together. Could I make a Forge and Fire game? Not quite, but I could make a game that is built around that blacksmithing concept.
I was going to ask, because that's one of my favorite shows too, right? The famous saying the guy says is your blade will cut. But there is that attraction to that, right? Like when I look at all the TV shows that are on TV and reality TV and things like that, everything from cake, these baking shows and now candy shows and getting in dating shows. There's every possible genre you can think of reality shows. And when they first started showing these shows where people were forging metal, I was like, wow, like this is so obscure, but I can't look away, right? Like it just pulls you in. And what I think is really cool about those shows is how deep they get into tradition, right? They go deep on tradition, and they'll pick a certain historical background, whether they're talking about katanas or other types of forged steel, and they encourage people to follow the traditional ways. And when you hear these blacksmiths, even modern day blacksmiths, they'll talk about it and they'll explain, here's why this blade is strong, and here's how you approach it, and here's how many times you have to fold the metal to get this kind of design out and so forth. It's super cool, and I can see how this would feed into your kind of desire to say, okay, now how can I, capture some of that essence, right, into a game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the show, the first half is all about just a knife, but then the second half is the history and special blades or special weapons, and it's just really cool to see those people's personal forges and all the different things they do in their garage or their home setting to try to do what people have been doing for thousands of years. Yeah,
And do
very
you
cool.
you do you know, like, I know in all your on your page there's tons of imagery of this black. So do you know a blacksmith, or is that just kind of set up
Um,
like?
we did two things in terms of trying to reach out to blacksmiths. One was my partner in publishing, Hammer Dog Games, Danny O'Neill. He was in Eschenspiel, and he brought a copy with him. And a German blacksmith just happened to go to his booth and liked his game because we had a prototype of Forge there. And he's like, "Take this game." So he took it to his home forge, and you'll see the picture of Nikolai or Nicholas, I can't remember.
Yep.
He's the cover of the Forge Kickstarter page, and that's him at his home forge holding the game. So that was one part, and he played it with his family, and he said he enjoyed it, and he's actually bringing it to another forge in where is he going? I think Finland,
Mm.
in early April, and is going to do some more photo ops. So that's just fantastic that he was willing to do that. And then near my hometown by Calgary, I just Googled and looked for modern blacksmiths. Are there any out here? Type of thing. And there was a guy on a place called Black Cat Metal. His name is Chris, and he has a bachelor's in some kind of social studies or whatnot, but he decided to change his lifestyle and just become a modern day blacksmith, and that's his life now. So he bought a shop. He lives in Calgary, and he just makes knives and does training classes to teach people about how to make things out of nothing using kind of historical materials.
Yeah, what I think is kind of cool, some of these shows too, is you'll see them like take like a piece of chain and they'll melt it
Yeah,
down and make it into like a weapon, right? Like it's insane. And then the imagery you had on that video too is pretty cool. The guy smacking the forge at the beginning. So did you guys film that, or was that the German guy, or is that the guy in
no,
Calgary, or?
I never shot that talent. Well, that's good old paying Shutterstock for
Oh, there you
stock.
go.
$50 to get a video. Like it's only a small part of the clip, but the idea or the premise was, just introduce a quick blurb about forging history or thematics, and then break the silence with the hammer strike, and then go into the game.
No, it's super cool. And I mean, full disclosure to anyone who's listening, I actually backed this game, right? So I'm very excited about this game myself. I can't wait to get a copy of it. I'm going to show your Kickstarter page on screen for people who are watching live or on the replay. So I was wondering if you can kind of this plays up to 4 players. It's 1 to 4
Yep.
players, so I guess there's a solo mode. Um,
Yep.
can you walk us through kind of the essence of how to play this game?
Yeah. So worker placements, there's always a commonality to worker placement games. Everybody has a certain amount of workers, and you can go to certain places. So in this game, we call them assistants. Each player starts with 2, and you automatically get a third and a fourth in the game. You don't have to go and buy them or feed them or any of that stuff that you do in some Euros. But each turn, you take one of your assistants or your blacksmith token, and you go to a place in the city to get resources or contracts or materials. And throughout the game, you're going to be using those things to try to upgrade your forge, make it a little bit better, get some benefits. You're going to try to train your assistants. So your meeples, your assistants can actually have individual powers that you don't often see in games. And so you might train a meeple who's really good at going to get gemstones from the mine, or you might train one that can actually do blacksmithing duties. So training is a part of it, developing your forge is a part of it, and of course the essence of the game is about forging things, so you can forge contracts to earn more money and earn points. All of this kind of tethers together in an achievement board, and kind of one of the core talking points about the game is dropping a hammer, dropping an achievement hammer. The game end triggers when one person has dropped their 5th hammer, and there's 7 different achievements. So there's a little bit of a race mechanic going on that you don't always see in worker placement games or Euros, because you're watching what each other are doing and seeing, can I get that achievement before somebody else so I get a few more points, or is that player going to end the game on me? And if they are, what can I do to maximize my points before that happens? So a lot of commonalities to existing Euro games, but some racing mechanics and some thematic tie-ins that I think still help differentiate it.
And how long does this game play?
Uh, a short game is about 60 minutes. A long game usually no more than 90 minutes when you know the rules inside and out. And Setup time is probably 5 minutes or less.
And I noticed you guys have this on Tabletop Simulator as well. Has this been on Tabletop Simulator for a while, or is this just part of the launch? Or
Yeah, I've had it on TTS for the last 6 months or so. I'll probably keep it on there for another month, and then we'll be pulling it off once the campaign's over and the game's produced.
oh, really?
I
Okay.
like TTS as a way to playtest. I like it as a way to promote and have people see the game while the campaign's live. But you don't always want to give away the farm once the game's out there. You really want to sell the physical copy after that.
Yeah, it's that's kind of the thing, right? Like, yeah, I think for prototyping, for sure. And it's surprising on a game like this when you have this many components. It's actually pretty tough to program these into tabletop when you have all these little components, right? But from my own experience, it's a great tool to prototype, to iterate with, but also then to have people play test around the world. Right. And so if there's some places where you can't physically get your game for somebody to try it out, you can still do a playthrough of that person so they get a good idea on how it plays. And then I've seen kind of two camps where people will both either leave it up or take it down based on how kind of the game goes, right? So, hopefully if you have people in different countries who have your game, they're going to reach out to you and say, hey, is there a way I can digitally play with my friend that's on the other side of the planet? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's super cool. And so this campaign now goes for, and you're almost funded. I think you're in around like 12,000 of the $15,000 goal.
Yep.
You're only a few days in, so it's not a question of if you're going to fund. The math is pretty clear. You are going to fund. Just a matter of how far over you go. How do you manage this slump? Like, what's some of your advice for some of the people out there that are doing their own campaigns where you have, there's that hockey stick, right? So you have kind of the big lift at the beginning, then you have this big middle dip, and then you've got kind of the hockey stick at the end. And people are always asking me, what do you do in the middle? Like, is there something you can do in the middle? Is there anything you can do to kind of get that going? Is there any advice you have for people out there on how to kind of approach that middle part?
Yeah, I mean, the bell curve is always going to be there. You can't avoid it. Like, you're never going to get the same level of backing every day as the first 2 days, but you can still influence what happens on some of those days. Like, we're running a 21-day campaign. So the first 3 days we know is all about the ads, the marketing, what we've done to build the crowd in advance, and the video and the content creators. That's all kind of at the beginning. Now we're hitting into day 4, day 5 is what we're getting into. So now it's about doing interviews as one way, just to keep it live, and you can share new posts. I had an interview with Mel from Mel's Board Game Room, and yourself on this fantastic podcast. There's one other person I'm lined up for next week. So just being able to talk about it while the campaign's live is important. Live play tests, I have one of those planned for next week that, even if you don't have a lot of people following to see when the event launches, once you're live, that you can show up automatically on people's feeds. And then I still have a couple of prototypes out there that people are just going to be playtesting and posting pictures of. So I would say just keeping content going, even if it's not the same level as the content that you launch with, that can help keep it fresh in the middle.
Yeah.
And then the end kind of has Kickstarter's algorithms and the people who are following for their 48-hour reminders. So the end kind of takes care of itself. It's that middle where you just want to keep pushing limited content without spending a lot of money.
That's a good point. Because I think we've all been there. I'm sure you've done this too, right? Early in your kind of gaming career, is you think you're going to be different, right? And you start pumping some money into different ads, and people will approach and say, "Hey, we do these banner ads and different things," and all that money, you might as well just light a match to it, right? It is very difficult to create any kind of spike in the middle. But what you can do, what you're saying, and I think this is great advice, is you need to be topical, and you still need to be kind of, present. So people know that this is still an active campaign and there's still some excitement there, but you just understand that you're going to reap the benefit of that as you get closer to the end versus in that kind of middle slump, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, another part of that is if you have backers that are actually following your updates or your comments, you can get that encouragement and find ways for them to participate and share. Like, I think I don't know if I pinged you, but there's some people that I talked to recently that we hadn't pushed the Board Game Geek page up until yesterday. But now trying to make sure that anybody who's played the game has the prototype has a chance to put a rating and a comment, at least in the BGG page, and then we can kind of use that as a way to promote the game as well. So different avenues you can take that you might not have done before launch that you can still do while the campaign's active.
That's actually a great point. I just made a note of that in my book here. I was like, "Ooh, don't forget to tell the content creators to give you a review in Board Game Geek." Right? Um,
Yep.
this Hammer Dog Games. So, how did that come about? So, they are like your publishing partner, or walk me through that. What is that relationship?
Yes. My first job was at a comic book store when I was 19, and one of the guys that was running and working at the shop was a guy named Danny O'Neill. And throughout the years, we hadn't talked. Maybe we probably had a 15-year break where we didn't even speak.
Yeah.
And then when I got into board game design, we ended up talking over Messenger, and then he helped gave me some advice on my early games. And then just last year, he's at a point where he wants to really push his game company, which he's been running for years,
Hmm.
kind of a sideline. He wants to push that up, and I'm still working on my FunDaMental game. So he's a great guy. He likes my content. I like his, and so we're going to kind of merge some of our campaigns together. He's got a great product called the World's Greatest Screen that is RPG accessory, and he's got a couple of board game or RPG books like the Grand Temple of Jing and some Haunted Manor one. But he's just really good at participating and driving in the process of making a game marketable and reaching out to other people. And I think he has a lot of great ideas of his own games. Like he has a game called Chaos Chess that we're working on, and another one called Magic Tavern that we've been playing around with. So we're just excited to try to have more ideas come together instead of individual.
Yeah. Somebody once told me, I had an old boss used to say, "None of us are as smart as all of us."
Yeah.
And it is so true, right? Like you can go it alone, but man, if you can get some feedback from people around you or bounce have that sounding board to bounce ideas off, it's just going to allow you to elevate things. Like I can think in every single one of the games we've done, something that someone that we're showing it to came up with, and we're like, "Ooh, that's actually a really good idea," and you implement it, right? And so there's no shortage of ideas out there. You just got to kind of sort through which ones are the ones that are best kind of suited to what you're trying to do, and then be willing to implement it. I guess is kind of the challenge, right?
Yeah, and that's the best part about playtesting games too. Is you'll playtest with 20 people, 50 people, however many people you end up playtesting with, and just out of the 2,000 ideas they shove at you, which 10 are going to make the game better? Because you can't implement all 2,000 ideas. You're just going to make a mess of your game. So
Yeah.
just parsing out the best and still appreciating their ideas, but knowing that they can't all work.
Now I know for you this is a side hustle, like most of us in this industry. Um, how have you kind of mapped this out for yourself as a company, right? Because you've got a number of titles. How many titles are you at now?
This is game number 6 and project number 9 or 10. I'm losing track, James.
Yeah,
I'm
we're kind of
losing.
actually in the same spot. So, um, and when you start getting to that number of games, what I'm finding myself is it's becoming a little bit easier to kind of promote the company because you don't just look at like a one game company. You actually have a portfolio of games. Are you do you have inventory of all those games, and are you continuing to now kind of promote them as a family, or how are you approaching it as a business now?
Yeah, I mean, when I did my last campaign, Dungeon Makers, I still had add-ons for Legends of Novus, Die in the Dungeon, Questeros, all those other games that I've made. For this campaign, I just focused on Forge because Danny and I just formed this partnership, and we
Yeah.
wanted it to be all about this game and this kind of launch of our combination or our collaboration. But I do keep a Shopify page and still keep any titles I have running. I finally ran out of my first big board game, Legends and Novus, so there's a possibility of doing a second print run, but still deciding if the cost versus reward is worth doing that or not. But any other titles I have, I still keep live on my Shopify page.
And I think that's the decision process a lot of us try to go through is, okay, do I do another print run when this runs out? Do I do another campaign, maybe for an expanded like a 2.0 or kind of a second edition? Is that something you would look at for some of these earlier titles of revisiting them and coming back and refreshing them and almost doing like a second edition so that you get the benefit from the funding, from the crowdfunding, yet at the same time be able to kind of continue bringing these games to market?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be just as hard to run a reprint campaign as it is to run a new campaign.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose some of the backer interest because people who liked it the most already have the game and they might even be dismayed. So it's a tough call. I haven't made that decision yet if I want to do that. I know that if I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't crowdfund it because I haven't made enough money off games to just
Yeah.
make 2,000 wait for them to sell. I need Kickstarter as the platform that helps manufacture the games in the first place. So I'm not sold on the second edition yet, but I think it's probably a better idea to make an expansion and a second edition at the same time instead of just a second edition.
Okay, so the original game, but it's also going to come with here's some add-ons for people who already have the game. They can then add it on to their copy, kind of a thing.
Yeah, so you have a reason to reproduce the first game for new backers, but
Yeah.
people that already know about the game and can actually socially promote it and say good things about it have a reason to back it as well and participate.
Yeah, we're in this camp with Tanks But No Thanks, which was our first game that we had published on Kickstarter, where there's been so many learnings since we launched that game that if I was to launch it today, I would do that game very differently, right? Different type of artwork, and make sure there's like a solo mode and things like that. So we've actually established all this. And this is what I'm going through, right? Do I do the base with like an expansion kit? Or do I just say I'm going after a new audience and we're going to do a complete refresh of this game and have it come out and it'll look like our original game, but on steroids, so to speak. I still don't know. I'm still kind of on the fence with this because I'm kind of with you on that, right? Where you're going to have some people that were there during the first wave that they helped you get started, right? And are you going to be upsetting them? Or maybe you offer them some kind of a deep, I talked to one of our last guests about this too. Do you offer a deep discount, right? Do you say, okay, maybe I'll just give like a super discount for those original backers. So if they want to get the whole new version, they can. That might actually be cheaper than trying to kind of split it up and do original with then this kind of add-on piece, right? Like it's kind of funny. Often I'll talk to people, they'll say, you should add on this, you should add on that. And the more complexity you add to a game, the costlier it is, right? In terms of logistics, pick pack fees, things like that. I had a game where the person had one card that had just somehow in the manufacturing process, that one card had got folded over. So there was like a fold in the corner of one card. And they said, can you send me a replacement card? I sent them an entire new game. It was cheaper for me just to send them an entire new game than pay someone at the warehouse to open up a card game, sort through, try to find the card that's banned, put that into a little package and send it off, and then they replace it. It's like, guys, I'll just send a new game.
Like in my garage, I have 2 or 3 open games that are just used for parts, and
yeah,
always hoping that the part that one person's missing is different than the part from another person. But I've had to open 2 or 3 game boxes because there were 2 people that were missing the same part. And it doesn't happen often, maybe 1 out of 500 games, but
yeah,
like you said, you got to find the pieces somewhere.
And then what do? At some point, you run out of space, right? You just can't hang on to all these partially open games and hope that someday someone might need the replacement, right? So I think I'm getting better at just kind of calling it at certain points and saying, you know what, we're just going to kind of cut bait on this and kind of fish in this other direction. It's about efficiency. I think the more games you have that you're launching.
So when you talk about add-ons and components, and one of the things that Danny enlightened me on, and I, for some reason, never came to mind, was that if you can keep your component weight under 4 kilograms or 4 pounds, I can't remember, probably pounds, 8 pounds would be a lot, but if you can keep your game under 4 pounds, the shipping is dramatically less than if it's over 4 pounds. So even adding on an extra board or an extra 20 cards, that might just be the thing that makes shipping $10 more per game, and then you just tanked yourself.
Coins is another example of that, right? People say, oh, I'm going to throw coins in. Well, yeah, you just added like a pound of weight to your game. That ain't cheap, right? So yeah, it's crazy. So what do you have any other titles coming up, or what's going to come after Forge? What's kind of next on deck for you guys? Can you talk about it, or kind of where you guys headed?
Yeah, I mean, Forge was kind of our flagship game to launch us being a collaboration. Danny's been working on another card game that is built upon the game of chess called Chaos Chess. I don't want to talk too much about the game because I don't know how much he wants to release yet, but that's something we're working on together. And then he has spoken, and we've looked through some opportunities for kind of a party game system called Magic Tavern that really uses a lot of familiar games but puts them into a fantasy setting and has a neat packaging and philosophy behind it. So those are a couple that we're looking at. There's another different themed game that we're considering for next year, but haven't fleshed out yet. So there's a lot on the roadmap for us anyway.
All the excitement never ends. Well, Wes, for anybody that wants to follow your campaign, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. Just go down and click on that. Or quite frankly, just go to Kickstarter and type in Forge. You'll find it there as well. Man, I want to wish you all the best of this campaign. I can't wait to get my copy. I'm excited for this. So hopefully everything goes super smooth and goes even faster than you anticipated so I can get this before the end of the year. I want to wish you and Hammer Dog Games all the best, and you take care.
Thank you, James.
Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.